I'm very honored today to introduce to you Omar Shaker. He is a certified functional medicine practitioner and a trained physician skilled in clinical data science. He teaches professionals how to achieve their dreams without sacrificing their health or their sanity. You can find opportunities to work with him at shaker.health. You thought anxiety was only experienced by weak people until anxiety caught up with you. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. It's really easy to put ourselves in boxes sometimes, and these thoughts, these kind of constraints, I think, impact how we act and what our belief systems are. And I grew up in a, a home that was very supportive and was very challenging in terms of the expectations for me to um, excel and have good grades and build a career. So like most families, like most people in the world, there was like the doctor container and the engineer container, and I had to choose one of them, and I chose the former. And I had been very active in sports. I'd been very good in academia overall. So like continued getting better grades, going through the hurdles or the obstacles that I had towards my goals. And I never thought that anxiety was something that plagued me or that impacted my life at all. I thought it was kind of a state of disease that I just wasn't impacted by.
Yeah.
And um, and so I chalked up like a lot of things towards external environments or things that, um, my first inkling on about anxiety was like in social situations. It wasn't like about the career aspect at all, but it was really and I would feel like this anxiety after a social event where I'd go back and I'd be thinking about things like I should have said this thing. Why did I not say this thing? Why can I not be more of that thing? And I would sleep it off and continue with my life. Um, and then in my internship year, which was about 12 years ago now, it was just it felt like I hit a wall, Nancy. It was like really a moment where I think it was a moment of reckoning, a moment of understanding that I am human, like just kind of contacting my own humanity. And I consider myself lucky to have gone through that experience of depression and burnout back then, because I see now a lot of people that only have this moment of reckoning in their 40s or their 50s. And I understood at least logically and rationally and scientifically what the impact of stress hormones have on our bodies through studying medicine, but experiencing it is was a totally different wake up call, and it was also a very lonely experience. I had very
Yeah.
little words to describe it, and even now I'm finding it hard to talk about it, even though we can get philosophical and scientific about it. It's kind of a weird internal dynamic that I continue to unravel and help others now with.
So was you were used to excelling and excelling was the standard your family held up for you. What did Was there any backlash or disappointment from your family when you changed careers all of a sudden?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just came back from a trip with them, and I think even 10 years after quitting medicine, I'm still finding it hard to explain what I do exactly and why I left traditional medicine. Um, my dad's a surgeon, so that's something I have to note. Like he had a certain expectation of me to take on his clinic and become a surgeon too, which was kind of where I was going. Um, so yeah, it hasn't been straightforward explaining what that is, but also, back to what I was saying, like the kind of expectations we have on ourselves um, create our reality in a way. And at some point I realized that their worry and their concern uh, is kind of an extension of their own lives, and kind of taking a step away from this parent that I'm trying to please, and then seeing them as just a human that also does not know uh, everything, as we like to think of parents growing up, you know. So it was a bit of like taking that space and not just like understanding my own humanity, but their humanity allowed me to
Yes.
not need to convince them, but to kind of go about my life, and that kind of released some of the tension between us of like who's right and who's wrong, and therefore it has resulted in a very supportive relationship that's more supportive now than any other time. But I still don't think they understand what I'm doing or why I left medicine.
Sometimes it's a giant leap for us, or it was for me anyway,
Hmm.
to accept that my parents would probably never understand
Mm.
my choices, and to make it okay inside of myself that
Mm.
they're doing the best they can, but they're probably never going to get it. You kept it all bottled up, all the emotions, the resistance to medicine, perhaps the desire to change, the anxiety, until finally you couldn't keep it bottled up anymore. It must have created some kind of crisis that prompted a complete change in your profession. What was it like to navigate that transition?
Yeah, and I'll add that I've experienced maybe a couple of similar transitions since then, and it does get better, although it doesn't get completely resolved. So, back to the loneliness, I think it's a key experience in our modern life that makes things maybe harder than they need to. I think of transitions as a concept in a lot of um, early civilizations, or in more like tribal settings, which we've evolved in, involve a community really helping you get through this kind of rite of passage, whatever it is. Whether you're going out to, you need to hunt a lion and bring it back in like some African tribes, or simply any of these rituals that we do as a community, maybe religious or non-religious ones, or even birthdays or grieving loved ones that are no longer with us. These are all things that we are used to having a community help us get through. But there are certain things that I think are equally important transitions that we are forced to go through on our own just because of the stigma around them. Career transitions is one of them, something like getting fired or getting laid off, but also heartbreak. And I think when I first realized that I don't want to be in medicine and wanted something else, there was an overwhelming it wasn't like a flooding of emotions, but like you said, these trapped emotions was causing overwhelming sickness in me, and that manifested as um, like stomach aches. It manifested as change in appetite, fatigue, and overall what I self-diagnosed as chronic depression. And so the only real pathway that I had was to go to a psychiatrist, because that seemed like the responsible thing to do. And I remember going to my dad in his clinic because I was too ashamed to even tell my mom about that, or my sister, or anyone from my colleagues. And that is part of what is really hard about practicing medicine right now for all of the physicians around the world. Um, we're seeing more and more doctors commit suicide or leave medicine, and there's more doctors and nurses that have left the industry than ever before. So, all of that is coming to the surface now, especially after the pandemic. But back then, there were no reference points for me to feel like what I'm going through is normal. So that's when I had to kind of, going back to the idea of being weak, like that was the story in my head. And therefore, because I am weak, I don't deserve happiness. That was how it was linked up in my head. And I needed to work harder on whatever it was to um, be accepted by society, to be happy and have a career and whatever else, fill in the blanks. And so what I did back then was, yeah, go to a psychiatrist. He gave me Prozac. I stayed on it for a couple of months, and I quickly realized that I was becoming numb. So there was just an intuition. I can't really call it anything but that there's something else for me. And at that point, then I had to change my external environment dramatically, and my external environment was changing. Egypt was going through. I was living in Egypt back then, and Egypt was going through the Arab Spring, so there was just like this surge of bottled up emotions everywhere around me. So it it I think it was I was lucky to be going through my depression while the country that I was living in was kind of experiencing a lot of stagnation kind of move. So it allowed me to feel less alone, and that was just kind of great timing. But ultimately, I changed everything about my life. I did an internship in Boston, and I just reached the same. So, in the beginning, I was like, okay, maybe I just need to leave Egypt and come to the States where practicing medicine is going to be amazing, and it's going to be full of opportunities and people that will teach me. And I quickly realized that's not the case. And as a matter of fact, there was even more pressure to perform in many different ways, and more isolation, like more expectation to just learn things and bottle things up. So, but because I had moved or changed my environment and moved to a new country, I felt like I was starting to at least, see different, interact in a different way, like change the stimulus. But really quickly, I left medicine and went into data consulting and became like this traveling consulting. And all of a sudden, I have a big fat salary that I don't even know what to do with. And, just like all of a sudden, I went from barely being able to pay for my own gas and my own dinners to having this kind of luxurious Bay Area lifestyle. And what led me to where I am now is that, this is kind of like 4 or 5 years down the line from that moment. And I hit the same wall again. And I realized that, okay, like I've changed literally everything in my external environment, and in my financial situation and my health. Like I had at that point started adopting morning routines and started just noticing what I eat and how I move and all of these things. And yet there was still like this kind of um, tension inside of me that there's something that I need to achieve in order to feel X or Y. And that's when I really started to dig deeper and realized, okay, the external environment is critical, but there's also my own internal view of the world. And I think those two are kind of, we sometimes miss the point. Like we sometimes only look at, our boss or our work as the reason why we're miserable, which
Right.
could be valid. But also it's like what we make out of it. And, Gabor Mate talks about this as the definition of trauma. It's not the blunt force that is beating us up. Of course, it's part of the story, but it's really the bruise that remains afterwards. And there is some liberation in that, where, we're going to be exposed to all sorts of stressors and, things that will generate anxiety within us. But then how do we create that buffer is a capacity that we can grow in. And sometimes we need to leave the environment, and that's the only way. We need to quit the job, we need to quit the relationship, we need to quit the country. But other times we need to enhance our capacity to deal with these things. And it's not like, that we need to suck it up and continue bottling our emotions, but we need to like adopt a better perspective towards that kind of anxiety in our lives.
When you say adopt a better perspective, you're talking about changing your beliefs. Like the belief may have been the only way I can be successful is as a doctor. And when it was like your soul was on a journey to find where you actually really belonged. And it was painful to have to let go of those expectations of your family and the self-judgments that you were weak or you were bad because you wanted to quit and get out of a profession that just didn't completely suit you. So have you, is part of the transition creating a community of friends or professionals that support who you are now?
Absolutely, yeah. Um, the um, the community piece continues to be like why I like living in the Bay Area, why I'm choosing to live in this harbor in Point San Pablo in Richmond, because um, yeah, I think being around people that believe in you is such an again ingrained part of our humanity and evolution that we somehow decided is no longer important, and we value the even when we look at health, we value like our own individual health rather than how we function in community. And there's that loss of that third space where we'd use and go and socialize or meet people, right? And it's just like it's home to work, and now it's just like home to home. Even it's like not leaving home at all, and we're just trying to like create things in the world through these screens. So I think you're absolutely right. Like being not just being around people that agree with us or relate to us, but I think part of it is like having enough trust with people to be challenged and to also meet the same people over and over again. There's a beautiful book called Settled by Chantal Donnelly, and she wrote about like this concept of high frequency friendships, where it is like we walk around in the city and we see like a million new faces every day and our bodies have to figure out, are these people trustworthy, are they not? But
Yes.
seeing the same people over and over again is something I think we miss, and I think is an amazing like nervous system regulator, because if you and I are friends and we meet for coffee or lunch like at the same time, there is a predictability to, I can expect who you are, what kind of conversations we'll be having. I can know going in that you are safe towards me, and that, so predictability is like great for the nervous system. Anxiety comes, one of the things that causes it is the uncertainty. And so we can find some predictability in people if we kind of develop these bonds. However, in this world again where we are striving for more, sometimes we're just especially in the Bay Area, there's like this idea of like having as many friends as possible and going to as many parties as possible. And I think that's actually, it's very stimulating, but it's actually like aggravating to the nervous system to a large extent.
So you compared the effects of stress to a monster with many heads. Would you name some of those heads?
Yeah. Um, One of them is anxiety, which is kind of the first manifestation, and it's kind of like an aggravation again of the nervous system. So our what we call the sympathetic nervous system is aroused, and anxiety is us trying to cope with that over and over again. But prolonged anxiety and when we're in that kind of stress state, like our minds are activated. So our chemicals or stress hormones are giving us almost superhuman powers so that we can run away from a lion, right? And it's important to have that. But stress and worry over and over and over again then kind of keeps flushing our system with these hormones, which ultimately leads to a depletion. And that depletion is also known as depression. So that's another head, where it is a sense of like being fatigued, not having enough energy to get out. And I think very few people understand the relationship between anxiety and depression that way, where prolonged anxiety can lead to depression. Like that
Yes.
is not just a hypothesis, that is exactly how the body functions, where there's this the idea of learned helplessness. Like I've been anxious about this thing for so long that now I'm just going to give up and I'm going to stay in bed for a couple of weeks because what else can I do? That's another mindset.
Right.
A third head is and that could have many subheads of its own, is chronic disease. So there's a huge link between depression and diabetes, depression and heart disease, depression and cancer. And so now we're starting to like the science is bridging the gap between our emotional health and our physical health in a way that we didn't really understand before. Maybe just understood it intuitively. But these are like the many kind of heads of Medusa that can, or the Hydra monster rather, that can like keep coming up because of how we deal with stress. And it starts really small. It starts with just wanting to please your boss and like being afraid to say no and like going out of your way and compulsively putting other needs before yours. Um, and over time it leads to a lot of these problems, and you know we only identify them sadly when it's too late and when it's kind of a diagnosis that we need to take a medication for, and then we deal with it also in a way where it's kind of like just keeping it going, just maintaining that thing, versus the root causes which might have happened decades before.
So describe a little bit about how what you do now, how you work with professionals.
Yeah. So I got certified in functional medicine in 2020, around the time where a lot of doctors were coming out and saying, hey, we're burnt out. Hey, there's like a lot of issues in how the healthcare industry deals with doctors. And I was very encouraged by that because I had taken that path and I realized that I'm not alone. And I was also kind of tired of just doing data consulting that, you know, then took me out of like the care that I wanted to, like the care for people that kind of was appealing about medicine to begin with. So instead, I was working a lot with like just data sets and dashboards and screens, and I was getting tired of that too. And so I got certified, and then I um, started a program first with like the traditional well-being kind of data-driven aspect that I see a lot of people do now. And I found a huge blind spot because what I did was I measured a lot of biomarkers for 15 doctors, and I got this grant to do this experiment. And we measured the biomarkers before and after. And throughout the 3-month program, I walked them through the different areas of functional medicine, which are exercise, sleep, nutrition, stress management being one of them, relationships and addiction. And it was really helpful while I was coaching them. But then I did biomarkers afterwards, and I realized that people regress to their old habits really quickly when I stop being this kind of weekly presence or daily presence in their life. And I knew that that was counterproductive, but also like I didn't see that in the beginning because I was, I was just seeing the results that I wanted to see.
Yeah,
But luckily, because of the biomarkers, I saw another interesting thing, which is that the cortisol, which is the stress hormone, increased. And so that forced me to actually think about what I'm doing further. So that first experiment really guided the format now. But at that point, I didn't know what was wrong. I just knew that like I had this idea that wellness may cause stress, and it was like very counterintuitive. But now I see it everywhere. Now that I know it exists, because like when we are overachievers and people pleasers, which is like the most deadly combo for anxiety and depression, ultimately, the the way we approach health can sometimes be the same way we approach work. And so we're trying to achieve uh, consistent meditation. We're trying to achieve biomarker optimization. We're trying to achieve VO2 max, and we're trying to run marathons, and we're trying to go to yoga every day. And we're trying to like, be like dress up in like the right gear, whatever. And that's when that was a big aha moment for me, and I thought, well, maybe that's the energy that I'm also bringing to this program. Like I want people to achieve, I want to, and so I had to step back, and during that time I had been working with a therapist that uses internal family systems, which
yes,
leverages the idea of the multiplicity of the mind.
yes.
um, and I was lucky to have gone through a year-long training with him and two other therapists in a group, and that gave me kind of like the missing tool, which is that a lot of these people in the early experiments were using shame and guilt to promote their or to move their health behaviors forward, and the idea of like the multiplicity of the mind allows me to actually take a trauma-informed um, approach before we even talk about these functional areas. So what I do now is I offer a 6-week program specifically for people that are in jobs that are very demanding and feel like they're, as a result, sacrificing their health. and I work especially with a lot of immigrants where we feel like we have to work harder to just to balance the table. And the idea is that we tackle these kind of thought patterns early on before we start creating health goals. So I try to get them to do to be like very grounded when they are creating their goals, so that they don't use the same muscles. So sometimes I like to describe it as, we have two hands, and one is like the self-compassion one, and the other is like the achievement one. And usually when we're in these jobs, because of how we've survived and how the world has rewarded us, we have a really strong like right bicep and a very weak one. So we do everything with our right hand. So when we want to approach health, we're like achieve goals, all of that individualism. But what we do is like try to get within 6 weeks, really help them narrow down what these dynamics are and release these burdens, and then use that from like a behavioral health approach. So every time I, you know, don't hit my goals, I have this other muscle that I can rely on now to kind of like balance out the situation. And so I've been seeing amazing results that go beyond me needing to work with people. So we work for 6 weeks intensely, and then it's a membership community kind of approach, which makes it much cheaper than having to hire a coach to work with you one-on-one. But also, I think back to your point about community, that's what I believe actually creates long-term impact is, in the 6 weeks, I'm just helping them deal with things that we only have to do one-on-one, and where they have to actually develop a language. But once you have that language, you can speak to others and create more of a generative impact for everyone. So that's kind of where I'm at now with how I see health.
So you do 6 weeks of intense training and checking biomarkers. And after that, they graduate into a community of others who have been through your program. So they provide mutual support. Is that accurate?
Correct. And we continue measuring the biomarkers every 3 months, but it's less of me needing to do this one-on-one work and us figuring it out together, which I think is just much more helpful.
I love the model that you've set up, and it's evidently working very well, not only for your clients but also for you.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
feel very grateful to be doing this work, and finally, after all these career switches, feel like I'm where I need to be. And sometimes, we can't connect the dots into the future, but looking at them in the past gives us that perspective of why these things had to happen.
Well, you're discovering what you didn't want to do took you on a journey to finally find where you actually fit, you belong. That must give you a lot of joy. I highly
Yeah, it does.
Go ahead.
It does, and the other thing I wanted to add is like the empowerment that not just I feel, but the idea is that once someone goes through an experience like that, so what I see is like I just facilitate people to go through the tough times, the tough transitions in their lives. But what often happens is that these people don't just become well, they start becoming a safe space for others in their workplace, because when you know someone that's been through a depression and has come out and is kind of doing even better now,
Right.
he becomes a person that like others go to when they are feeling, and so that like that kind of depression or don't know what to do about it. And I think that's kind of the world that I'm trying to build alongside many others that are really leading this change. And I think we're on the precipice of just tackling mental and physical health in a totally new way.
You are passing on the wisdom you've gained to multiple others. I highly recommend that the viewers of this video read your entire article on Authority Magazine titled 5 Effective Strategies for Mental Well-Being. I've been talking to Omar Shaker. How can people reach you, Omar?
I'm available at omar@shaker.health. And you can find me also on LinkedIn. Also, Omar Shaker.health is in my name to make it easier. And you can go to shaker.health to learn more about me and the Better Perspectives podcast and the Human Dash program.
Do you only work with clients that can see you in person, or do you also work with people online?
I offer both.
Well, offer both. Wonderful. I want to thank you for spending some time with me today, kind of expanding on the things that you shared in the written article. And I wish you the very best. I love the work you're doing. You're bringing a lot of light to our world as well as better health.
Thank you so much, Nancy. It's a pleasure to do this with you and a pleasure to get to see your work and thank you for just choosing such a timely topic and for all the knowledge and wisdom that you are spreading and allowing people to spread. So thank you for being that kind of presence and pushing things out into the world that the world needs to hear.
You are so very welcome. I'm so delighted to support the work of people like you that are making our world a better place. Wishing you the very best, Omar.
You too, Nancy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.